Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Steve Down and this is my guitar. We are in week 5 looking at Mule by Kenny Burrell. This week we have finished the first solo. There is a second solo which we're going to take a look at. It's just one chorus, but we're going to take a look at it and that'll be next week. This week we're going to take a look at how Kenny comps underneath the sax solo, and this might not be as exciting as the solo itself, but it is really, really super important. And it's well worth making sure that you're learning how to do this kind of thing in your studies, in your practice. Because there will be opportunities for you to do this. You won't be the only person soloing when you get together with other musicians. And you are going to have to learn how to comp appropriately and effectively underneath other players. So that's what we're going to take a look at this week. He does comp over 5 choruses of the sax solo. I've just included one chorus at the beginning of this video. If you want to get the transcription for the other 2 choruses, then head over to Patreon, and the link is on the screen here, www.patreon.com/Exeter Guitar Lessons, and there you should be able to find all of the transcriptions from this series and any other series that's on my channel, and a few extra bits and pieces as well. And you'll also get all of the chord scale packs and everything else that's on there, and the backing tracks for everything that you hear on this channel. Before we get into the lesson itself, I want to say a big thanks to my patrons. I actually only recorded the last episode yesterday, even though you're seeing it a couple of weeks later. So there's only been a couple of people that have signed up in the last 24 hours. But big thanks to Chris, Gary, Glory Bearer, and Lamine, or Lamine. I'm not sure quite how you pronounce that, but loads of people, you know, in my book, to sign up in 24 hours. That's amazing. So thanks, guys, for that. And thanks to everyone else who's signed up in the last 2 weeks when you're seeing this. As I said, if you want to sign up to the Patreon, the link is on the screen here. The monthly subscription is $3, and you get everything for that, and you can cancel at any point. But if you don't want to do a monthly subscription, you can just buy me a coffee. There's a link below in the show notes. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, drop me a comment, and hit the bell to make sure you know when the next episode is coming up. Okay, I'm going to jump around a little bit in here, and we're going to take a look at various points in the 3 choruses that Kenny comps over. But the first thing we're going to look at is the first 4 bars of the first chorus that he plays over. So here's that. Okay, the main thing I want to talk about here is the rhythm that he's got going on here. Now, this is known as a syncopated rhythm. A syncopated rhythm is basically a rhythm that is offbeat. So you'll see that he's playing on beat 1 and then on the and of beat 2. And then sometimes, not all the time, he's playing an accent on beat 4. This is a classic blues comping rhythm, so you could learn this and add it in. I've extrapolated this out for the whole of the 12 bars. I've included various different voicings. You may not play like this, jumping up and down the neck, but I've just used some of the common voicings that Kenny uses, so you can take a look at this. It's well worth making sure that you know this rhythm inside out to be able to comp over the top of this, or any other kind of slow blues. It does work over most of them. Do make sure that you vary it, though. As I said, I've extrapolated it out to make sure I'm playing the same thing each time for your practice, but do make sure that you're varying it like Kenny does. So that means that you might not have it syncopated so that it's on beat 1, the and of 2 and 4. You could have it syncopated so that it's beat 1, the and of 2, the and of 3, or just beat 1 and the and of 2 and the and of 4, like Kenny does sometimes. So just experiment with moving it around once you've mastered this particular one. So here's a good exercise playing through the whole 12 bars. So as I said, you could quite easily do things like this, like that, when you're moving some of it around. Or you could do like that. Any kind of permutation of playing offbeat will work in this kind of situation. So just experiment and move around where your offbeats are going to be, and make sure that you're not trying to do the same thing every single time. A good, 2 or 3 bars of the same thing is good because you don't want it varying all the time. Maybe do 3 bars the same and then 1 bar that is different, just to kind of change it up a little bit. And every 4 bars you could change the rhythm slightly, but make sure that if you've decided to be syncopated, keep it syncopated for the whole chorus if you can, but just make sure you're leaving some space and changing it up where you can. Okay, let's take a look at the next 2 bars. Okay, so these 2 bars are taken from the first chorus of the sax solo where Kenny's comping underneath. This is quite simple here, but there's something that I just want to talk about, which is what we call the tritone substitution chords that Kenny's inputted here. Now, basically, the simple way to think about this is if you've got the chord that you're heading to, in this case it's F9, just go a semitone up and you get the tritone substitution there. And the tritone substitution is basically where you take the dominant of the chord that you're heading towards. So in this case we're heading towards F9. So the dominant of F is going to be C, and a tritone away from C is F sharp. So we basically make a 9 chord on that F sharp. And that's basically what Kenny's used at the end there. Like I said, the simplest way to think about this is just to go a semitone up from the chord that you're heading to. So in this case, it's going to be F sharp 9. And you can see that he places it in syncopation at the end of the first of the 2 bars. And then he adds in the F sharp diminished as well. That is part of the harmony in this particular chorus. So that's not a substitution or a particularly special chord in there. This is part of the harmony in there. But again, it's well worth making sure that you're doing that as well, and that you've got a couple of variations of that F sharp diminished chord. Remember that you can move these F sharp diminished chords up in minor thirds around the neck. Any of these will work if you want to substitute them. And then you've obviously got these ones as well, which we've covered before. They also move around in minor thirds around the neck as well. So just, make sure you've got a couple of different options so that you can change things up whenever you want to. What I've done for this exercise that you're about to see is, because this isn't the only place in these 3 choruses where Kenny uses this tritone approach chord, I've shown you a couple of different versions approaching a C9 chord, an F9 chord, and a G9 chord. So there'll be a semitone above, so C sharp 9, F sharp 9, G sharp 9, respectively. So you can add those in, making sure that you're resolving to the chord that you're heading to, rather than staying too long on that tritone approach chord. So here's that exercise. Okay, let's take a look at the next 2 bars. Okay, so these 2 bars are actually taken from the second chorus of the sax solo. So as I said, if you want to get the whole transcription of all 3 choruses, then head over to Patreon, www.patreon.com/extra guitar lessons, and you can download the full transcription of all 3 choruses there. These 2 bars come from 7 and 8 in the structure itself, but from chorus 2. And the thing that's interesting here is he uses what we call first inversion chords. So a first inversion chord is basically where you've reordered the notes that are within the triad. So for instance, the first chord that he uses here, that is a first inversion chord, is over an F. And you'll see that on the transcription it says F/A. Now what that means is it's an F chord, but the A that is contained within that F chord is in the bass. So it's a first inversion because we've taken the next note down, so F/A/C are your 3 notes within that chord, and we've taken that first note after the F, and we've moved it so that it's the lowest note in the chord. So the ordering of the chord now is not F/A/C, it's A/F/C, and so we get this sound, which is a lovely, lovely sound. And I've extrapolated this out. Obviously, Kenny uses a couple of these first inversion chords, but I've extrapolated it out for all chords that are diatonic. I've given you all first inversion chords that are diatonic in the key of C. So here's that. Now Kenny does something really lovely. He goes up and then does an A7 sharp 11 approaching this D minor chord. Now this is the next thing we're going to take a look at. So let's take a look at the next 2 bars and then we'll talk about what that D minor chord is there. Okay, so in this section here, what we would call this is superimposing chords. Now, the bass player underneath isn't always following what Kenny's doing. Sometimes he is, but sometimes he's not. So throughout the 3 choruses, you'll hear that he does this superimposing a couple of times. Sometimes it's with a D minor 9, sometimes it's with an E flat minor 9, and the bass player doesn't always catch it. And what Kenny's doing is he's adding in chords that aren't agreed to be in the harmony, and so we call this superimposing chords. Now, this particular chord here is diatonic to the key of C, so the D minor 9 doesn't clash too much. The E flat minor 9 from later on does, but works as an approach chord to the D minor 9. But basically what he's doing with this D minor 9 is kind of setting up a 2, 5, 1, going back to the 1 of C, which is the key of this piece. And the 2 chords that he uses are D minor 9 and then an F over G, which is a substitute for just the 5 chord. It's just a nicer, kind of more gospel sounding thing. And as we heard in the last episode, Kenny is kind of a little bit partial to this gospel sound and adding it into the blues. Back in the first chorus, we did hear him using an E minor going to an A7, which is a 3 chord. And sometimes in a jazz progression, you might get 3, 6, 2, 5, which is this. And that's sometimes a really good thing to put in this particular 4 bars here. So you could superimpose over the top of these 4 bars that 3, 6, 2, 5. The other thing I want to talk about these particular 2 bars is, and throughout most of the choruses that we've got here, is Kenny's use of altered chords. Now, altered dominant chords are basically where you've got your dominant chord, so your C7, F7 or G7, and you've either altered notes within the chord itself, so that could be a sharp 5 or a flat 5, or it could be that you're adding in extra notes like a 9 and then you're sharpening it or flattening it. These notes add an element of tension. They're really, really good if you're just about to move to a next chord. So, for example, the movement from the 1 to the 4 chord, the C7 to the F7 chord, it's well worth altering the C7 chord just before you approach that F7 chord. Here he does a sharp 9 on the 1 chord and then resolves it back to the 1 chord going into the last 2 bars. But there are plenty of places where he sharpens the 9 or sharpens the 5th and then moves to an F chord. It doesn't really work over the top of the 4 chord, but it does over the top of the 5 chord. So the best place to use that is using a sharp 9 or a sharp 5 over the top of the 5 chord. In this particular context, it's G. So you could do that as well. Here's an exercise just showing you some voicings of those chords. And so you should be able to see Kenny using this throughout the comping underneath the sax solo there. As I said, place it really well. Place it just before you're about to change to the 4 chord, or if you're going from the 5 chord back to the 1 chord. Those places are really, really good because they add lots of tension, and as long as you resolve it really well, then it sounds good. Let's take a look at the last 2 bars. Okay, nothing massively interesting here in the last 2 bars. I've taken this from, again, the second chorus in the sax solo. The only thing that is quite nice is him using those 6 chords at the end there. The A flat 6 going to the G6 instead of using dominant 7th chord. So you could try using that in some of your solos as well. It's a nice alternative, a nice variation. So, well done for getting through all of that. There's quite a bit in there. As I said, you can go over to Patreon. That's patreon.com/extra guitar lessons. It's on the screen here. And you can get the full transcription of all 3 choruses there, and also the chord scale exercise packs that are on there, not just for this particular episode, for every episode in this series and for all of the other series that's on my channel. And there's some extras there. All the backing tracks is all there, so make sure you go over there. It's only $3, and even if you're just a member for 1 month, you can still cancel and you'll still be able to get what it is that you need off of there. So it's well worth doing. As I said, you can still buy me a coffee. There's a link below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you next week, and we'll look at the second solo, which is just 1 chorus, before we head back to the head at the end. So happy practicing, and I will see you next week. Bye.